The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched into the darkness above, its crystalline walls pulsing with soft blue light. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each zone carefully designed for their unique needs. The air itself was a carefully managed mixture that could support most forms of life, though many delegates wore breathing apparatus or sat in sealed environmental pods. Ambassador Vexus Thyra floated in her sphere of shimmering energy, her ethereal form barely visible to most eyes. She was ancient even by her species' standards, having served the Galactic Council for over 3,000 years. Her voice carried across the chamber like wind through crystal caves, cold and musical. "We gather today to discuss the petition from the species that calls itself humanity," she announced. "These creatures from the third planet of a yellow star in the Outer Rim territories request membership in our ancient confederation." A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through some sections of the chamber. The Zephyrian delegates, tall and thin like walking plants, swayed in their characteristic gesture of amusement. The crystalline Nexari representatives chimed together in harmonic discord, their version of scorn. "Let us review what we know of these humans," Vexus Thyra continued, her tone dripping with disdain. "They have existed as a spacefaring civilization for barely 200 of their planetary years. Their technology is crude, still relying on chemical propulsion and nuclear fusion. Their lifespans are laughably short, averaging less than 100 years. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed images of human cities, human ships, human faces. To many in the council, they looked like hairless primates that had somehow learned to use tools. More concerning, Vexus Thyra went on, is their history of violence. In their brief existence, they have fought thousands of wars against their own kind. They have created weapons capable of destroying their own planet. They show no signs of having evolved past their primitive aggressive instincts." Counselor Jector of the insectoid Cathara species clicked his mandibles together. "The data shows they still maintain separate nations on their homeworld. They cannot even unite their own species, yet they seek to join a confederation of 47 different civilizations." "Exactly," Vex Thyra agreed. "They are divided, violent, and technologically inferior. What could such a species possibly offer to our great alliance? What wisdom could beings who live for less than a century provide to those of us who have existed for millennia?" From his position in the military section of the chamber, General Corac remained silent. The massive Vrexani warrior sat motionless, his scarred hide bearing the marks of a dozen campaigns across the galaxy. His people were the military arm of the Council, bred for war but tempered by centuries of peace. His yellow eyes, each the size of a human fist, watched the proceedings without revealing his thoughts. "Their ships are pathetic," continued another delegate, this one from the aquatic tidal realm. "Their largest vessels are smaller than our scout ships. Their weapons could barely scratch our defensive screens. And their claims of achievement," added a Nexari representative, its crystalline voice ringing like breaking glass. "They speak of landing on their own moon as if it were a great accomplishment. We were traveling between stars when their species was still discovering fire." The chamber filled with sounds of agreement from most species present. Only a few remained silent, and fewer still seemed troubled by the mockery. Vex Thyra raised one ethereal appendage for silence. "The question before us is not merely whether to grant them membership. The question is whether we should allow them to continue their expansion into space at all." This caused a stir. Even some who had been laughing moments before became quiet. "Consider," she continued, "what happens when a violent, primitive species gains access to better technology? What happens when beings who solve their problems with warfare encounter our peaceful trade routes? What happens when creatures who cannot even control their own primitive emotions gain access to weapons that could threaten civilized worlds?" The images on the holographic display changed, showing human military units, human weapons, human soldiers. To many in the chamber, they looked like barbarians playing with toys they did not understand. "I propose that we not only reject their application for membership," Vexus Thyra declared, "but that we establish a quarantine around their solar system. Let them remain trapped in their small corner of space until they either destroy themselves or evolve into something resembling civilization." The vote was swift and decisive. 43 species voted in favor of the quarantine. 3 abstained. Only 1 voted against. General Corac's vote against the measure surprised many. But the ancient warrior offered no explanation for his position. When asked to speak, he simply shook his massive head and remained silent. As the session ended and delegates began to leave, many felt satisfied with their decision. They had protected the galaxy from a dangerous primitive species. They had maintained the integrity of their ancient alliance. They had shown wisdom in rejecting those who were clearly unworthy. But General Corac did not leave with the others. He remained in his seat long after the chamber had emptied, staring at the holographic display that still showed images of human cities and ships. His aide, a younger Vrexani named Thekvar, approached cautiously. "General, the transport is waiting," Thekvar said softly. "Tell me, Thekvar," Corac rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "What do you know of the Vrexani exploration missions from 3 centuries ago?" The younger warrior shifted uncomfortably. "Very little, General. Those records are classified at the highest levels." "Yes," Corac nodded slowly. "Classified, hidden, forgotten by most." He stood, his massive form casting shadows across the empty chamber. Perhaps that was a mistake. As they walked toward the exit, Thekvar worked up the courage to ask, "General, why did you vote against the quarantine?" "The humans seem exactly as the council described them." Corac stopped walking. For a long moment he said nothing. Then very quietly he spoke words that would haunt his aide for years to come. "Because, young one, I have seen the classified reports. I know what my grandfather encountered in human space 300 years ago, and I know that the council has made a terrible mistake today." They left the chamber in silence, but Corthac's mind was already working. He would need to review those old reports again. He would need to prepare his fleets. Because if he was right about what the humans truly were, the galaxy was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. Behind them, the great chamber of the Galactic Council fell into darkness, the last light fading from the holographic display that had shown the faces of humanity. In that darkness, a decision had been made that would change everything. The Council had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. They had decided to cage them like dangerous animals. They thought they understood what humans were. They were about to discover how wrong they could be. The news of the Council's decision reached Earth 3 weeks later through intercepted communications. The human diplomats who had waited hopefully for acceptance of their membership application instead received word of their species' quarantine. The message was brief and cold. Humanity was confined to their solar system indefinitely, deemed too primitive and dangerous for galactic society. For many humans, it was a crushing blow. For others, it was an insult that demanded an answer. The first test came only 2 months after the quarantine was announced. A small fleet of ethereal vessels appeared at the edge of the asteroid belt, where human mining operations had been expanding to gather resources for their growing space colonies. The ethereal ships were beautiful things, translucent and flowing like frozen music, but their purpose was ugly. Commander Sarah Chen watched from the bridge of the mining station Prosperity as the alien ships began their attack. The ethereal weapons were unlike anything humans had seen before. Beams of pure energy that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, striking their targets from impossible angles. "All miners, return to station immediately," Chen ordered into her comm. "Emergency protocols are now in effect." But the miners were already dead. The ethereal weapons had struck the mining ships with surgical precision, vaporizing them without warning. 23 humans died in the first 30 seconds of contact. The attack was brief. The ethereal ships destroyed the mining equipment, the processing facilities, and the storage depots. Then they simply vanished, phasing back into their higher dimensional space as if they had never been there. They left behind only wreckage and a message broadcast on all frequencies. "Primitive species will remain within designated boundaries. Violation of quarantine will result in enforcement actions." The human response was swift but measured. Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of the Earth Defense Force, called an emergency meeting of the Solar Defense Council. "They killed our people without warning," Webb said, his voice calm but his eyes hard. 23 miners who were doing nothing but their jobs. "It was a warning," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, the head of Xenological Studies. "They want us to know the quarantine is real." "It was murder," Webb replied. "And murder demands a response." The response came in the form of 3 modified asteroid mining ships, their drilling equipment replaced with railguns and their engines upgraded with the latest human fusion technology. The ships were crude by galactic standards, But they carried something the aliens had not expected: human ingenuity and human anger. When the ethereal ships returned 2 weeks later to destroy another mining operation, they found humans waiting for them. The battle was over in minutes, but this time it was the aliens who suffered losses. 2 ethereal vessels were destroyed before the rest retreated to their dimensional space. But the humans had learned something important from the engagement. They had recorded everything, analyzed every energy signature, every movement pattern. They began to understand how the ethereal phase technology worked. The second test came from the Zephyrian Commonwealth. Their ships appeared near Luna, the human moon colony, moving like graceful dancers through space. The Zephyrians were raiders by nature, pirates who had been civilized by the Council but never lost their love of taking what belonged to others. They attacked the lunar settlements with typical Zephyrian tactics: fast strikes, overwhelming firepower, and quick retreats. They expected the humans to cower behind their defensive shields and plead for mercy. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to learn from every mistake. The first Zephyrian attack was successful, destroying several lunar facilities. The second attack met stiffer resistance. By the third attack, the humans had developed new tactics specifically designed to counter Zephyrian speed and agility. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison led the defense of Luna City during the third attack. His pilots flew ships that were barely more than fusion engines with guns attached, but they flew them with a skill that shocked their alien attackers. "Remember," Harrison told his pilots, "they're fast, but they're predictable. They think in 3 dimensions, but they fight in patterns. Break the patterns and you break them." The human pilots did exactly that. Instead of trying to match Zephyrian speed, they predicted where the alien ships would be and hit them there. Instead of following the rules of space combat that the galaxy had used for centuries, they made up new rules. When the dust settled, 6 Zephyrian ships had been destroyed, and the rest had fled. The aliens began to realize that these humans might be more dangerous than they had thought. The third test came from the Nexari Collective. The crystalline beings attacked human communication networks, using their advanced cyber warfare capabilities to sever all contact between Earth and its outer colonies. They expected to isolate the human settlements and watch them fall into chaos without central coordination. Instead, they discovered that humans had a gift for improvisation that no other species seemed to possess. Cut off from Earth, the colony ships began working together in ways the Nexari had not predicted. They shared resources, technology, and information without any central authority telling them what to do. Dr. Kim Sato, the chief scientist aboard the research vessel Newton, led the human counterattack against the Nexari cyber assault. Working with whatever equipment was available, her team began to trace the alien intrusion back to its source. "The beauty of their network is also its weakness," she explained to her team. "They're all connected, all thinking as one. If we can find the right frequency, we can turn their own connectivity against them." It took 3 weeks, but the humans found that frequency. When they broadcast their counter-virus into the Nexari network, the effect was devastating. The crystalline beings, so used to thinking as one unified mind, suddenly found themselves dealing with chaos and confusion. As their own network turned against them, General Corac received reports of all 3 incidents in his command center aboard the Vrexani flagship Deathbringer. Each report made his concerns grow deeper. His aide Tekvar stood beside him as he reviewed the combat footage. "The humans are more capable than the Council believed," Tekvar observed. "No," Corac rumbled, his yellow eyes fixed on the tactical displays. "The humans are exactly what I feared they were." He turned to face his aide. "Send a message to the fleet commanders. Begin mobilization protocols immediately." "Sir, are we going to war with the humans?" Corthac's laugh was like the sound of breaking stone. "War? No, young one. We are preparing for something much worse than war. We are preparing for the moment when the galaxy discovers what humans really are." On the screens around them, the reports continued to stream in. Human ships were moving throughout their solar system with new purpose. Human factories were working around the clock, producing ships and weapons at an incredible rate. Human scientists were analyzing captured alien technology and improving upon it with frightening speed. The galaxy had tried to dismiss humanity as primitive and weak. They had tried to cage them like dangerous animals. But cages, Corac knew, only worked if the creature inside did not know how to break free. And humans, he was beginning to suspect, were very good at breaking things. The human counterattack began at exactly 800 hours, coordinated universal time, across 12 different star systems simultaneously. It was not the wild, chaotic assault that many aliens expected from a primitive species. Instead, it was surgical, calculated, and devastating in its precision. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the command center of the newly commissioned battleship Indomitable, watching as reports flooded in from across human space. The ship itself was a marvel of human engineering, built in just 4 months using techniques learned from captured alien technology, but improved with human innovation. Operation Homecoming is a go, Webb announced to his fleet commanders. All ships execute your assigned missions. Remember, we are not the aggressors here. We are simply coming home. The first target was the ethereal monitoring station hidden in the Kuiper Belt. The station existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions, making it invisible to most sensors. But the humans had learned to track dimensional distortions during their previous encounters with ethereal ships. Captain Lisa Rodriguez guided her stealth destroyer Ghost through the asteroid field, her ship invisible to ethereal sensors thanks to modifications based on captured alien technology. Her crew had trained for this mission for weeks, studying every piece of data they had gathered about ethereal phase technology. Target acquired, her weapons officer reported. Dimensional anchor is charging. The dimensional anchor was a human invention, a weapon that forced phased objects back into normal space. When it struck the ethereal station, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The station, caught between dimensions, tore itself apart as it was forced to exist in only one reality. The ethereal crew never had time to send a distress signal. Across the belt, similar strikes were taking place. Human ships moving in perfect coordination destroyed monitoring posts and weapons platforms that the aliens had thought were perfectly hidden. The humans had not just learned to detect the alien technology, they had learned to counter it. In the inner system, the Zephyrian raiding fleet found themselves facing an entirely different kind of enemy than they had encountered before. The humans were no longer defending fixed positions. Instead, they were hunting. Commander Zixhai led a squadron of 12 Zephyrian fast attack craft toward what intelligence suggested was a human supply convoy. The ships moved with the liquid grace that made Zephyrians famous throughout the galaxy. Their pilots confident in their superior speed and agility, they flew directly into a trap. The supply convoy was real, but it was bait. Hidden throughout the asteroid field, human ships waited with weapons powered down and engines cold. When the Zephyrian ships committed to their attack run, the humans struck from every direction at once. Ambush, Zixhai screamed into his communicator, but it was too late. Human weapons, crude but effective, tore through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. The alien ships, built for speed rather than armor, died quickly. Zixhai's ship was the last to fall. As his systems failed around him, he watched human fighters moving through the wreckage, their pilots flying with a skill that should have taken decades to develop. His last thought was that these humans fought like they had been born for war. The Nexari Collective faced perhaps the worst surprise of all. Their vast computer networks, which had seemed impregnable to every other species in the galaxy, suddenly became their greatest weakness. Dr. Kim Sato sat in her laboratory aboard the science vessel Newton, surrounded by screens showing the progress of humanity's cyber attack. The virus they had developed was not just destroying Nexari systems. It was learning from them, evolving, becoming more effective with every network it penetrated. The beauty of our approach, she explained to her team, is that we didn't try to think like them. We thought like us. Chaotic, unpredictable, adaptive. Their minds work like perfect crystals, but crystals shatter when you hit them at the right frequency. Across Nexari space, crystalline beings found their perfect unity dissolving into chaos. Their ships stopped responding to commands. Their weapons turned on each other. Their communication networks broadcast human messages in languages the Nexari could not understand. The most devastating blow came when the humans infiltrated the Nexari Central Command node. Instead of destroying it, they took control of it. Suddenly, every Nexari ship in space was receiving orders from human commanders. But the human assault was not limited to military targets. While their fleets engaged alien forces, human science teams were dissecting captured technology with frightening efficiency. What had taken other species centuries to develop, Humans were reverse engineering in weeks. Dr. Michael Thompson led the team analyzing ethereal phase technology aboard the research station Armstrong. His team worked around the clock, taking apart alien devices and rebuilding them with human improvements. The basic principle is simple, he explained to Admiral Webb during a video conference. They shift matter into a parallel dimensional space, but their approach is unnecessarily complex. We can do the same thing with 1/10 the power requirements and twice the stability. Similar breakthroughs were happening across human space. Zephyrian speed technology was being adapted for human ships. Nexari networking protocols were being rewritten to serve human purposes. In just weeks, humanity was leaping forward technologically at a rate that shocked even themselves. General Corac watched the reports come in from his command ship, each one confirming his worst fears. The humans were not just fighting back, they were winning, and they were doing it in ways that no other species had ever imagined. "Sir," Tekvar said, his voice tense with concern, "the Council is demanding to know why we have not moved to assist our allies." Corthac's massive form remained motionless as he studied the tactical displays. "Because, young one, our allies are already dead. They just do not know it yet." On the screens, human fleets were moving beyond their solar system for the first time, their ships now equipped with technology that rivaled anything in the galaxy. But more than that, they moved with a coordination and purpose that spoke of a unified species, finally showing its true nature. "The ethereals attacked human mining operations," Corac observed quietly. "The humans destroyed ethereal monitoring stations. The Zephyrians raided human colonies. The humans hunted down entire Zephyrian fleets. The Nexari severed human communications. The humans took control of Nexari command networks. They are escalating," Tekvar said. "No," Corac corrected, his voice grim. "They are teaching. Each response is perfectly proportioned to the original offense, but designed to send a message. They could have simply defended themselves, but instead, they are showing the galaxy what happens to those who attack humanity." As if to confirm his words, new reports began arriving. Human fleets were appearing at the edge of Council space, moving with grim purpose toward worlds that had participated in the attacks on human colonies. The Council had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. They had tried to cage them like dangerous animals. Now the cage was broken, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans really were. They were not primitives who had stumbled into space by accident. They were predators who had been politely asking to join the prey. And when the prey had chosen to attack instead of welcome them, the predators had stopped being polite. The real war was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in the organization's 3,000-year history. Delegates who had once sat in calm dignity now huddled in their environmental pods, their voices filled with panic and confusion. The great chamber that had once echoed with condescending laughter now rang with desperate pleas for assistance. Ambassador Vexithira floated in her energy sphere, her ethereal form flickering with distress. "How is this possible?" she demanded, her musical voice cracking with strain. "Our monitoring stations reported primitive chemical rockets and crude fusion drives. Now they appear at our borders with ships that match our own technology." Councillor Jektor's mandibles clicked rapidly in the Kithara expression of extreme agitation. 17 Zephyrian fleets have gone silent. 17. These humans hunted them down like animals. The Nexari collective is in complete chaos, reported another delegate. Their entire communication network has been compromised. They are fighting themselves because they cannot tell which orders are real and which are human deceptions. The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed the current tactical situation, and it was devastating. Red markers indicated human fleets moving through space with calculated precision, striking at carefully chosen targets throughout what had once been secure Council territory. But General Corac was not watching the display. He was watching the delegates themselves, seeing the fear in their alien features. After centuries of peace, they had forgotten what war really looked like. More importantly, they had forgotten what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. Finally, Vexithira turned her attention to the massive Vrexani general. "General Corac, your forces are the military arm of this council. Why have you not moved to counter this human aggression?" Corac rose slowly from his seat, his scarred form towering over the other delegates. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of ancient knowledge and bitter experience. "Because," he rumbled, 300 years ago, my grandfather made first contact with humanity, and unlike the rest of you, I have read the classified reports from that encounter. A hush fell over the chamber. Even the most senior delegates had never heard of this first contact. My grandfather, General Corac the Elder, was leading a Vrixani exploration fleet through what you now call the Sol system. This was during humanity's early space age, when they had barely reached their own moon. Our scientists wanted to study these primitive beings, to understand how they had survived on a world that should have killed them a dozen times over. Corac activated his personal display, showing images that were centuries old. The delegates saw primitive human spacecraft, crude but functional. They saw human cities scarred by war but somehow still standing. They saw human faces young and defiant. What my grandfather found was not a primitive species struggling to survive. He found apex predators who had conquered the most dangerous world in known space. Earth is a death world, counselors. The gravity that would crush most of you is normal to them. The atmospheric pressure that would implode your ships is what they breathe every day. The radiation from their star would kill most of us in hours, but they evolved under it. The images changed, showing Earth's history, ice ages that covered continents in ice for thousands of years, volcanic eruptions that darkened the sky for decades, mass extinctions that wiped out most life on the planet. 12 times in their planet's history, extinction events occurred that should have ended all life. 12 times these humans survived. Not just survived, they evolved. They became stronger, smarter, more adaptable. They turned their world's attempts to kill them into advantages. Corac's display now showed human warfare throughout history. Battles fought with primitive weapons but sophisticated tactics. Cities that fell and were rebuilt stronger than before. Technologies of war that advanced faster than technologies of peace. But the most terrifying thing my grandfather discovered was not their ability to survive extinction. It was their ability to learn from their enemies and become better at war than those who had attacked them. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usual background noise of alien breathing apparatus and environmental systems seemed muted. My grandfather watched as humans fought a massive war against themselves. A war that involved their entire planet, every nation, every person. He watched them develop weapons that could have destroyed their world completely, and then he watched them choose not to use those weapons, even when losing would have meant their complete destruction. The general's yellow eyes swept across the assembled delegates. Do you understand what that means? They created the power to end everything, and then they chose restraint. Not because they were weak, but because they were wise enough to know that some victories are not worth winning. New images appeared on the display, showing the aftermath of humanity's Great World War. Cities rebuilt, nations that had been enemies becoming allies, technologies of destruction turned to purposes of creation. My grandfather recommended that the Vrixani Empire withdraw from human space immediately and classify all contact reports at the highest level. He understood what you all failed to see. These humans were not primitives. They were a species that had learned to be civilized predators, choosing cooperation over conquest not from weakness, but from strength. Corac deactivated his display and stood in the center of the chamber. When they applied for membership in this council, they were asking politely to join you as equals. When you rejected them and established a quarantine, you were caging the most dangerous species in the galaxy and telling them they were not worthy of respect. But they are still primitives, Vexthera protested. Their technology is inferior, their lifespans are short. Their lifespans are short, Corac interrupted, which means they do not have the luxury of thinking in centuries like you do. They adapt quickly because they must. Their technology appears primitive because they build things that work, rather than things that impress, and their society seems chaotic because they have learned that diversity of thought leads to innovation. The general moved to the center of the chamber, his massive presence dominating the space. You attacked their mining operations, so they eliminated your monitoring stations. You raided their colonies, so they hunted down your fleets. You severed their communications, so they took control of your networks. Each response was proportional, precise, and educational. Educational? Jektor clicked. They are teaching the galaxy what happens when you attack humanity. Not to satisfy some primitive need for revenge, but to ensure it never happens again. Every species that has harmed humans has been harmed in return in exactly the same way, but worse. As if summoned by his words, a new communication signal reached the chamber. The main display activated, showing the face of Admiral Marcus Webb aboard his flagship. The human looked tired but determined, his eyes holding the same predatory intensity that Corac's grandfather had noted centuries before. "Members of the Galactic Council," Webb said, his voice calm and professional. "I am Admiral Webb of the Human Solar Defense Force. I am here to inform you that as of this moment, the quarantine around human space has been lifted. By us." The delegates erupted in angry voices, but Webb continued speaking. "Furthermore, any species that participated in attacks on human colonies or personnel now has 72 hours to surrender unconditionally to human forces. Those who comply will be treated according to civilized standards of warfare. Those who resist will learn why humanity survived 12 extinction events." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. General Corac looked around at the frightened faces of the council delegates. "You dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. You tried to cage them like dangerous animals. Now you are about to discover what happens when the apex predators of a death world decide they have been polite long enough." In the distance, alerts began sounding as human fleets appeared throughout council space, moving with grim purpose toward worlds that had dared to attack the species that had survived the unsurvivable. The galaxy was about to learn the cost of dismissing humanity. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. It was not the chaotic slaughter that many had expected from a primitive species. Instead, it was systematic, efficient, and absolutely devastating in its precision. Admiral Marcus Webb stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable as it entered orbit around Zephyr Prime, the homeworld of the species that had raided human colonies. Below them, the planet's crystalline cities sparkled in the light of their binary stars, beautiful and seemingly untouchable. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving surrender signals from the planetary government." Webb nodded calmly. "Acknowledge their surrender. Begin landing operations." But this was not a military occupation in any traditional sense. The humans who landed on Zephyr Prime came not as conquerors seeking to enslave or destroy, but as teachers delivering a lesson that would never be forgotten. Captain Sarah Chen, promoted after her actions during the asteroid belt incident, led the first wave of human administrators to the Zephyrian capital. Her orders were simple but profound: demonstrate human superiority so completely that resistance became unthinkable. The Zephyrians had always prided themselves on their speed and agility, both in space and on their homeworld. Their society was built around the concept of quick, decisive action followed by equally quick retreats when things went wrong. They had raided human colonies expecting to strike fast and disappear before any response could be organized. Instead, they found themselves facing humans who had not only responded faster than seemed possible, but had anticipated Zephyrian tactics and developed counters for them before they were even used. "Your mistake," Chen explained to the Zephyrian Planetary Council, "was assuming that our defensive posture meant we could not attack. You saw us protecting our colonies and thought we were weak. You never considered that we might be restraining ourselves." To demonstrate this point, human engineers began rebuilding the damage from the orbital bombardment that had preceded the landing. But they did not simply repair what had been broken. They improved it. Zephyrian buildings that had taken years to construct were rebuilt in days, using human techniques that made them stronger, more efficient, and more beautiful than the originals. The message was clear: humans could destroy, but they preferred to build. They could conquer, but they preferred to improve. The Zephyrians watched in growing awe as their world became better under human administration than it had ever been under their own rule. On Ethereal Prime, the homeworld of Ambassador Vex Thera's species, a different kind of lesson was being taught. The Ethereals had always existed partially outside normal space, considering themselves superior to species bound by simple three-dimensional reality. Dr. Kim Sato led the human scientific team that studied ethereal dimensional technology. But where other species had tried for millennia to understand how the Ethereals achieved their phase-shifting abilities, humans simply improved upon them. "The basic principle is elegant," Sato explained to the Ethereal Science Council, her words translated into their musical language. "But your implementation is unnecessarily complex and energy-intensive. Watch." She activated a device that seemed impossible by every law of physics the Ethereals understood. The entire human research station shifted partially out of normal space, achieving in minutes what had taken ethereal scientists centuries to accomplish. But more than that, the human version was stable, efficient, and required only a fraction of the energy. You dismissed us as primitive, Sato continued, because we had not developed this technology ourselves. But we did not develop it because we did not need it. When we did need it, we built something better than yours in weeks. The ethereal scientists watched in stunned silence as humans casually demonstrated abilities that surpassed their species' greatest achievements. Some wept, their crystalline tears falling like music. Others simply stared, their ancient minds struggling to comprehend how beings they had considered inferior could so easily exceed their most advanced science. But perhaps the most devastating lesson was delivered to the Nexari collective. The crystalline beings had always thought as one, their individual minds linked in perfect harmony. They had considered this unity their greatest strength, the foundation of their superiority over chaotic individual species like humanity. Dr. Michael Thompson stood in the central node of the Nexari network, surrounded by crystalline beings whose perfect unity had been shattered by human cyber warfare. But instead of gloating over their defeat, he offered them something they had never imagined: improvement. Your network is beautiful in its unity, he admitted. But unity without diversity leads to stagnation. You think the same thoughts, make the same mistakes, arrive at the same conclusions. We will show you a better way. The humans began rebuilding the Nexari network, but with modifications that seemed impossible. Instead of one unified mind, they created a system that allowed for both unity and individuality. Nexari could share thoughts and experiences while still maintaining their personal perspectives. The result was a collective intelligence that was both harmonious and creative. This is what we learned from our own history, Thompson explained. Unity and diversity are not opposites. They are partners. A species that can think as one when necessary, but also think as individuals when needed, is stronger than one that can only do either. As the months passed, the transformation of the galaxy became impossible to ignore. Species that had attacked humanity found themselves not destroyed or enslaved, but improved beyond recognition. Their technologies advanced, their societies flourished. Their capabilities expanded far beyond what they had achieved in millennia of independent development. And through it all, humanity made one thing absolutely clear: this improvement came with a price. Species that accepted human guidance and followed human rules prospered. Those that resisted found themselves increasingly isolated and irrelevant. General Corac stood in his private chambers aboard the Deathbringer, watching as his own proud warrior species knelt before human admirals. The Vrixani had been the military arm of the Galactic Council for centuries, bred for war and proud of their strength. Now they wore human rank insignia and followed human tactical doctrines, because human methods had proven superior to their own. General, Tekvar said softly, entering the chamber with a communication pad. The human command requests your presence at the surrender ceremony. Corac looked at the pad, which contained formal orders from Admiral Webb. The language was respectful, acknowledging Corthac's rank and experience. But the meaning was clear. The Vrixani were now part of the human military structure. Do you know what the most terrifying thing about humans is, Tekvar? Corac asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Their technology? Their tactics? Their ability to adapt? No, Corac replied, moving toward the door. The most terrifying thing about humans is that they are making us better. Every species they conquer becomes stronger, smarter, more capable than it was before. They are not destroying the galactic order. They are improving it. As they walked through the corridors of the ship, now filled with both Vrixani and human personnel working together, Corac continued his observations. When other species conquered, they enslaved or destroyed. When humans conquer, they elevate. They take our best qualities and enhance them while eliminating our weaknesses. They are turning the galaxy into something greater than it ever was before. They reached the main hangar, where the surrender ceremony was being held. Representatives from dozens of species stood in formation, waiting to formally acknowledge human supremacy. But this was not the surrender of defeated enemies. It was the initiation of new allies into something larger than themselves. Admiral Webb stood at the center of the ceremony, his uniform bearing not just human insignia but symbols from every species that had joined the new galactic order. When he spoke, his words were translated into dozens of languages, but their meaning was universal. We did not seek this war. he said. "We asked politely to join your council as equals. When you rejected us and tried to cage us, you made a choice. When you attacked our people and our colonies, you made another choice. Today you make a final choice, to join us in building something better than what came before." The ceremony was brief and dignified. No species was humiliated or degraded. Instead, each was formally welcomed into the new order as partners in humanity's vision of galactic civilization. They kept their homeworlds, their cultures, their identities, but they followed human leadership, because human leadership had proven itself superior. As the ceremony concluded, Corac found himself standing beside Admiral Webb. The two warriors, one alien and one human, looked out at the assembled representatives of the galaxy. "You know," Webb said quietly, "we really did just want to join your council peacefully." "I know," Corac replied. "That was what made you so dangerous. A species that desires peace but is capable of absolute war is the most terrifying force in the universe." Webb nodded. "We learned long ago that peace through strength is the only peace that lasts. We tried to offer our strength as a gift. When that was rejected, we had to demonstrate it as a lesson." Around them, the representatives of 47 different species began the work of building a new galactic civilization.